So hello and welcome to this conversation. How are you doing today, Amber?
Yeah, I'm hanging in there today. Not every day is an awesome day, but today is a hanging in there day.
All right. Well, interestingly enough, our topic that we're going to talk about today are things that are going to help you hang in there.
Oh, wow. Well, there you
Yes.
go.
And today's topic is going to be around the concept of mentorship.
Mm.
That inside project management, certainly mentorship's important. Having mentors, finding mentors, being a mentor certainly has an importance and a place in the field. So I thought I would start by saying, maybe what is your answer if I asked you the simple question, what is a mentor?
I think a very simple description of a mentor is someone who you respect enough to listen to what they have to say. I think at a very simple level, it doesn't have to be more complicated than that. I think the act of being a mentor is probably, the professional definition is way more than what I think it is, but I just think it's being willing to share yourself with others. And I think sometimes when we overcomplicate it, it takes on different meanings. I don't think mentorship should have within it clear authority,
Mm.
even though in business and certainly sometimes in projects, mentorship feels like you're always being mentored by someone who's smarter than you, gets paid more than you, has more authority than you. I think that's a bunch of BS. I think mentorship happens organically between colleagues and people who are just simply sharing their gifts and skills and offering help, support, or feedback.
Perfect, perfect. Well, as you know, I'm a lifelong martial artist, and one of my favorite stories in martial arts is, of course, The Karate Kid, where Mr. Miyagi is the mentor. But through the series, he learns from Daniel in the same way that Daniel learns from him, and there's an exchange back and forth.
Hmm.
So I'm curious, as someone who's had mentors and as someone who's been a mentor to others,
Hmm.
can you maybe share one of the values you learned from a mentor who took that time for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's many things. I think the interesting thing too is that I think I have more mentors than people know, in that I have accepted mentorship from people who weren't necessarily aware they were mentoring me. So this comes from, well, to be honest with you, even comes from listening to podcasts, following leaders, reading books, and listening to the thoughts and the hearts and the minds of others. And they have a mentoring kind of contribution. And they certainly have had that on my life. I remember being at a very large prof- professional event for project managers. I believe it was in 2016, 2017 in San Diego. And I remember a younger, I would say, quite introverted man took the stage. And his name was Simon Sinek. And I was sitting very close to the stage, and I had never heard of Simon Sinek. And I remember him sharing his why conversation, which some of our listeners may be quite familiar with. And if you're not, get familiar with it. And I remember at the time just being so impacted, first of all, with this man's humility on stage, because I've been on a lot of stages, done a lot of speaking, and I just felt really captivated by his genuine portrayal of self. And I recognize now, this many years later, of course, and watching the trajectory of Simon's career and the contribution he continues to make to that space, I he mentored me. Witnessing him face to face, being able to shake his hand in a lineup afterwards, and being in that room all those years ago when not everyone in the world knew him maybe as well as they do today. He mentored me. He mentored me in his presence on stage. He mentored me obviously in the sharing of his why conversation, and essentially what I got to see was his kind of live version of his TED Talk. And he was also at the time promoting his book, Leaders Eat Last, or something like that. I'm trying to remember the name of the actual title. Yeah. And, we talked about the military, and the military, of course, is something I know you have, near and dear to your heart. Certainly wasn't to me, but I just really was impacted by how much he took the military, which, let's face it, in a room in 2016, 2017 in San Diego with a bunch of professionals, you've got people all over the map on how they feel about military worldwide. It doesn't matter whether you're American, in my case, Canadian, whatever. But Simon made this kind of glimpse into the military hierarchy and the military formal mentorship program, essentially. And he gave a glimpse into it that was it was spectacularly human. And I came away going, wow, I have way more respect for that military hierarchy in a mentoring way than I ever had understood before. I bought his book that day. I also read the book, and really I recognize mentorship for me is also about what you take from others that are willing to share. And I didn't feel like I was having it delivered to me in like a package that I had to kind of gobble up whole. And I think mentorship is also about that. You can be mentored by someone who makes life choices that you do not.
Mm-hmm.
You can be well mentored by someone who, in their honesty and in their humility, says, I really screwed up here. I made huge mistakes. I continue to have bias. I continue to maybe don't, but these are the things I'm learning, and this is how I feel I'm going to start to change my trajectory. That can have a huge impact on anyone who has the ears to hear it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Because what I'm hearing you talk about is humility,
Mm-hmm.
and to have that openness to listen.
Yeah.
And I know in one of Simon's podcasts, I'd heard him talk about a military member who defined humility. And he defined humility as not like meekness. It's not weakness. It's not that, oh, I'm quiet, I'm soft.
Yeah.
It's the ability to be open to the ideas of others. And I really love that because I know you've been a mentor to many people over the years. In that frame of like being open to ideas, can you think of a time when you were mentoring someone and they hit you with something that you weren't necessarily ready and like you were open to? Because that happens in the exchange where each of us gets something. There's always something the mentor gets, something the mentee gets.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have to be power, like you said.
Yeah.
But it's about the sharing of information and ideas. Was there an idea that's ever impacted you that's come by surprise?
Yeah, I mean,
relationship.
Well, and I'm going to hit you right back. You had that impact. I remember a conversation you and I were having, not actually too long ago, probably in the last year or so. And I was talking about something, and you just sort of said, well, would you not say that would be connected to your relationship with your father? And I remember being like, come again? And I remember also thinking like, okay, I know we've known each other for like 15 years. But like, who are you to talk to me or make a correlation to me about my relationship to my dad and how I feel? I didn't say any of that to you, but that's sort of the inner dialogue, right? But at the same time, in that moment, I realized it was a really impactful thing because it made me stop, not in our conversation. I kept talking to you, but I think, upon reflecting, it made me stop and think about what you were saying. It also, I think from your angle toward me, it was not, you didn't share it as sort of like, I'm going to hit you with it. It just was this natural thing where you just asked a curious question. And I also think that that's a big piece of mentorship. I think when you have mutual curiosity with someone, that it's not about saying this is the way it is. Because to be honest with you, if you claim you are a mentor and you have to tell who you're mentoring that you're a mentor, and then you speak to them in those sort of diatribes of you will do this, this is the way it is, I would argue you suck at it. You're not a mentor. You're an arrogant SOB, potentially. You are leading with ego and self. I think mentorship is not something you claim. I think it's the action. It's what's received and or given without title and without that hierarchical authority. And I think that can be a really beautiful thing, a beautiful exchange. So I know for me, for you in that moment, you asked a curious question. You made no statement about my life. But I took that question, I spun it in my mind as a statement. And then I was able to perseverate on that privately. And it came to be something really valuable for me at the time. It really helped me kind of reframe my thinking. That's mentorship. But I don't believe you had like a pen and a paper and you had scripted it and you were thinking, well, I'm going to try to talk to Amber about this today. I think it just happened naturally. So I think, the irony is, and I do want to state this, I actually have a title right now that includes the word mentor in it as a part of my volunteer role with PMI. I have huge respect for this role that I have. It's a great honor, and I'm humbled to have it. but I don't want the people that I'm supposed to mentor to know I'm their mentor. I want them to feel that I'm there for them. And if that mentors them, great. But really, what I just want is for them to know that I'm here, that I have their back, that I am keenly interested, and I'm here to support them. And actually, it isn't about me telling them what that support looks like. I would much prefer it to be them asking or us mutually finding ways to help each other. I don't see every person that holds the title mentor approaching mentorship that way. But I think that's because oftentimes there's an ego play going on.
Yeah, what I'm here. So how I like to define coaching as a coach is the act of co-creation.
Hmm.
That it's the curious act of co-creation. You're using questions in order to come up with something for the advantage of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But like you said, there doesn't have to be ego in it. Like it's I don't care whether I own it or the person owns it. What I care is that there's value
Mm-hmm.
in whatever the person wants to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hearing that's sort of your definition of mentoring as well, that it has to have a co-creation act.
Mm-hmm.
And that in that co-creation, yeah, there's times when, it's certainly in our conversation, times when you've thrown fastballs at me, times I've thrown fastballs at you.
Yeah.
And it's the act of co-creation that has that space and the openness that we said earlier on humility to be in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, again, we're making a little Simon Sinek centric, and Simon, if you're listening, please.
I was going to say, dude, thanks.
We'll
Thanks,
happy
Simon.
to have a conversation. But coming back to Simon,
yeah,
I do know that I heard in one of his conversations he had in a podcast, he was talking about when fans meet him on the street, he says, "Thank you for the movement because it's part of a movement." And you and I are both easily part of this movement. I think we both came to the movement independent of each other.
Yes,
but found out that you love him too. I love him. I've been reading him, and we didn't know.
I know, but I've seen him live.
You have seen him live. I've only seen him through video.
Sorry, I just threw you off there.
No, it's okay. When we talk about the movement, though, because he's got a movement,
yeah,
and when we're in a space of open co-creation,
yeah,
we're still moving towards something,
right?
So, what are some of the things that are important for you to be part of your movement that you want to make sure you're bringing to the world?
Oh my gosh, you just said my movement. So that's like conjuring up like a whole bunch of things. Like, first of all, I don't want one. And second of all, the first thing I thought of was like, man, like I am as boldly arrogant and full of ego as anybody I know. This has actually been like the heavy lifting of my life. And the lack of self-awareness around how strongly I led with my ego for most of my, life has just been like, in the last decade, I've just been profoundly impacted by how much my arrogance was leading. And that comes from deep insecurity, deep insecurity. And for those that know me, you included, like to think that Amber is insecure is like a laughable thing, because I walk into every room with my chest up and feeling very confident. That comes from being an only child, being raised by two people that thought that the stars and the moon were set just for me. So I was beautifully encouraged in my young life, and I had a lot of opportunity to do whatever and to succeed. And I did, and I have. At the same time, that wasn't attached to my own self-awareness for most of my life. It was actually just like, I don't know, everybody believed I could, so I did. what I was aware of in this catching up to myself was my ego is beautiful, strong, wonderful. Yours is too. All of ego is a very important part. It's how we use our ego. It's the control or the power with which we have it. And that's where, as a mentor, as a coach, as a teacher, these are all roles that I have, even as an executive director, these roles of authority that I have. My movement now on the other side of this self-awareness journey is, oh, I want to hold those positions with great respect, but I also really want to be transparent within them. I want to share my vulnerabilities. I never did that before because I was always protecting my ego. I was always worried that if I let people know how I was insecure, that my power over them to say something would slip. And what I've discovered, of course, and I think most people discover in this journey of self-awareness, is the more vulnerable, the more transparent you can be, that actually reverses the power and it puts very much the power back into your hands, because you realize, does it make you vulnerable to be vulnerable? Surprisingly, not as much as you think. We are our most vulnerable, I think, when things are coming from behind that we are not aware of. And, literally, yes, but also figuratively. When things come out of the woodwork, when you are shocked and surprised, you are far more vulnerable than when you have had your eyes open already and you see it coming. This is what project managers do. We see risk. I always say, if you're a project manager and you're really good at it, you like risk. You don't want risk, but you like it because I got to bring it in. I got to welcome it over. I got to massage the risk, make plans for it. I got to collaborate. I've got to literally own the potential risks in such a way that when and if they begin to be real, they don't intimidate me because I have a plan. Does the plan work all the time? No, but just having the plan makes you sleep at night. So for me, this idea of getting my ego in check so that I realize it's a power, but I want to be that transparent, vulnerable person with authority. And that actually allows people to see that I'm far more accessible, and in that accessibility, mentorship can happen. I am far easier to be mentored when I have the ears to hear what others are sharing. Even when I don't like what they say, I don't have to emotionally react to that. I can take that away and I can use cognitive behavior, approaches to break it down. What's logical? What's reasonable? What's true? And how do I feel about it? And all of those things are different channels, and then mix those channels appropriately based on the lesson I might have to learn. And as a mentor, sharing that that's a process I use, that actually ends up helping mentor others. I'm not doing it so much as a mentor. I'm doing it because it's my own need. It's my own journey. And I think that's where the movement of, I have been well mentored by people who are like that, who demonstrate that humility and that vulnerability in action, and who have not lost power because of it. So I'm like, okay, then I'm going to follow them. And I got a lot of stuff going on in my life. There's so much going on in my life that if everyone knew the truth of it, they'd be shocked. The types of massive shifts in thinking that I have to face on a regular basis, the insecurities and the securities I hold. But what I'm trying to do is share those, and no, not with everyone. Although I will say, when I'm asked to keynote and I get up on stage, sometimes that stuff leaks out. And perhaps that makes people in the room feel uncomfortable. I know for me, if you want some insight onto me, do I feel uncomfortable being vulnerable on stage? Actually, I feel the opposite. I feel like when I share those things, it makes me more accessible, and it allows me to hear and to feel how that affects others. I've had so many people come to me afterwards in those rooms and say "Oh my gosh, I can't believe when you said this. This is how I felt." And I'm like, "Wow, how awesome is that?" It wasn't me. I didn't reach into their mind and heart and soul and try to spin something. I just shared my truth, and that had an impact. That's the movement I would be really interested in pursuing for the rest of my professional life. Yeah.
So perfect. And I love where you're going with that, because as you know, I'm a firm believer that when it comes to anything of genuine value in life, it requires risk and vulnerability.
Mhm.
Like if you want to find a partner, you've got to stir up the courage to go over and say hi.
Yeah.
Okay. To get a job, you have to put yourself out there in the world. And actually, if you want anything in the deep and meaningful relationship category,
Mhm.
there is no deep and meaningful relationships without risk, without vulnerability. Like it's an absolute must.
Yeah.
So if I'm a listener at home and I want to take the leap, take the plunge, go out and be risky, be vulnerable,
Mhm.
because it's an uncomfortable space. And even some of our conversations have dipped into spaces that
I
are
know.
quite, no one, as a conflict coach, no one likes having a difficult conversation. That's why we call them difficult.
Yeah.
How would you give someone some advice to take those first steps or to reach out and share appropriately?
It's funny, I feel like I'm a bit of a broken record on this, but I think it really goes back to this collaborative piece. You don't have to have a massive amount of people in your life, but you do have to have a couple trusted people. And I think how you get those, partly you get those by being your true vulnerable self. And when you find rooms, either work environments or professional associations or community organizations or wherever you spin your wheels, when you show up genuinely in those rooms and you share yourself, the people who are there to support you and can be a support to you, they will find you. I really believe that. And I think I always encourage people too when they say, well, how do I find my team? How do I build, the support in my life for my career or whatever? I say, you've got to actually be able to do almost that dating thing, which is you got to go over and say hello. You've got to be willing to take the risk. I will say over and over and over again that I believe professionals need professional association. That means you need to be associated with others who have a similar role to you that don't work where you work. Because it's so important for you to have perspective that, you're a project manager? You work there? How do you work there? What does that look like? How does that feel? It's so important for you. And I'm speaking of me. If I'm a project manager and I work in this environment, if I'm only associating professionally with people in my environment, it's incredibly biased. And, this is where the diversity, equity, inclusion comes in. We need to seek diversity, equity, inclusion. And if we don't have it in our work environments, if we don't have it in our home environments, we need to seek rooms where that can be had. And I think professional associations can give that. Now, obviously, I'm biased. I'm a member of PMI. I have been a member of PMI for a decade, and I am absolutely grateful for the Professional Association of Project Management Professionals. It doesn't have to be that kind of association. It could be a community association. It could be a religious community association that you have. I mean, we all come from diverse backgrounds. We have beliefs that are all over the place, but we need to find people that we can be ourselves with. And that, even if it's not in a professional environment, having people who know who you are, that you're not fake with, those become these people, these rocks, these supports, these collaborators. Also, and I should say this, I think it's important as professionals to pay for feedback, to pay for coaching, to make a fiscal investment in yourself, to actually invite a professional into your life to coach you on a regular basis. You need third party. A lot of organizations will provide coaching and mentorship as a part of their organization. I say great, but remember that's going to come with a certain perspective based on that organization. And I think third party perspective is really important. They're not your family. They're not your colleagues that you work with. They are a professional that you're paying to have them give insight. And the only insight they're there to give is the insight they can give just to you. So I think that's really important. For some people, this also needs to extend to therapy. I think we need to be in therapy. We need to have therapists as a part of that sort of holistic package of humanity. But for some, I think it can probably be professional coaching. I just think it's important to work at ourselves and not just go through life. And I think, being mentored, sometimes you actually have to go out there and seek it. A lot of professional organizations offer mentorship opportunities as well as a part of their value to their membership. That's awesome. Do that. And if the mentorship experience isn't positive, that you don't have to continue with it, but don't decide mentorship isn't right, because that's just one situation. Continue to actively pursue those connections and those relationships. Online, there's a lot of great mentoring kind of collaborative group experiences. LinkedIn has amazing groups, Facebook groups. Find these places where you can just show up and be yourself, and that will have an impact. Absolutely. It has in my life, and it will time and time again if you can find ways to be your genuine self.
Well, for our listeners, I hope you are able to find that mentor that you're looking for. And Amber, I do want to say thank you for the conversation today, for those who you've mentored, and for the contributions you've passed on from those who've mentored you. So thank you.
Thanks, Martin. Really appreciate it.
Goodbye.
Bye.